My name is Major Greg Arabian. I'm honorably discharged from the United States Air Force, and I am a veteran of the Korean era conflict. And I'm also the oral history director of Post 41 AmVets, the Corporal Paul S. Masubian Post in Watertown, Massachusetts. And this is Saturday, October 18, in the year 2003. And we're here today to take the oral history of Albert J. Arsenian, also known as Parsech Arsenian. Is that right, Albert? Yeah. Okay. There are 19 million war veterans living in the United States today, but we lose about 1,500 a year. So, motivated by a desire to honor our history's National War veterans for their service and to collect their stories and experiences while they're still among us, the United States Congress created the Veterans History Project. And the authorizing legislation is Public Law 106-380, and it calls upon the American Folk Life Center at the Library of Congress to collect and preserve the audio and videotaped oral histories, along with documentary materials such as letters, diaries, maps, photographs, and home movies of Americans, war veterans, and those who served in support of them. The purpose of this is to be of information and perhaps to inspire future generations as to the fact that freedom in these United States of America is not free. Freedom requires sacrifice of time, of effort, and of a certain type of person who is willing to defend freedom and the security of this country. And we have with us one of the veterans of that era, namely World War II, and we're going to ask Al to give us his recollections and his history during World War II, because it is a history which is studded with all kinds of experiences. So I'm going to leave this scene, zoom in on Al, and start this history going. Is that okay with you? Okay, Al, let's start out with asking you, where were you born and brought up?
I was born in Boston, Massachusetts, brought up in Medford, Massachusetts, graduated from Medford High in 1943.
Mm-hmm.
And the day after I graduated from Medford High, I was drafted into the service, the U.S. Army.
Did you have any military training while you were in high school, like cadets or anything like that?
No, I didn't have any previous training.
Did you have any skills, such as rifle or any type of skills that would help you in your boot camp training?
The only skills that I had were sports at that time.
And what kind of sports did you engage in?
Baseball, hockey.
Okay. So these sports that you engaged in, you were in pretty good physical shape.
Absolutely.
Uh-huh. And where were you inducted?
I was inducted at Fort Devens, Massachusetts.
Mm-hmm. Fort Devens is closed now, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
Mm-hmm. And what did you do over there? Just the basic paperwork?
Yeah, at Fort Devens, we merely were processed in terms of being given our gear,
uniforms and such.
Uniforms and such. And shortly thereafter, we were transferred to our first location, and that was Camp Stewart, Georgia, where I was assigned to an anti-aircraft battalion, 40 millimeters, and there we were trained until such time as the Battle of the Bulge, And at that time, they broke up our outfit and gave some of us 6 weeks of advanced infantry training and shipped us overseas.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So when you were at Camp Stewart, Georgia, you didn't know anything about an anti-aircraft gun, did you?
Prior to going to Camp Georgia, I didn't
Yes,
know
Camp
anything
Stewart.
about it.
Yeah.
I didn't know anything about an anti-aircraft gun. However, we learned about the various means of defending airports, identifying enemy aircraft, and then operating and firing 40 millimeter anti-aircraft weapons.
And was the fear of attack by the air pretty real in those times?
Oh, yeah.
Because
Yeah.
Germany had quite an air force.
Yeah, oh, yeah.
So that was a primary.
Well, at that time, we learned, being on an anti-aircraft crew, one had to be able to identify enemy aircraft to make sure that you didn't shoot down your own aircraft.
Mm-hmm.
And we learned to identify our aircraft, B-51s, B-47s, B-17s, B-25s, etc.,
Right.
as well as we learned to identify the German type aircraft,
Mm-hmm.
Stuka dive bombers, etc., and also the Japanese Zero
Yeah.
aircraft.
They all did you think that they all pretty much looked the same, or did you have to do quite a bit of studying to distinguish one from the other?
You had to be able to identify different features of their aircraft, the enemy aircraft versus our aircraft.
And the way they build it is different from the way we do it?
Well, the appearances, the appearance, for example, a Japanese Zero, okay, was very light-looking aircraft. It didn't compare to, say, the U.S. P-47, which was a heavily armored fighter aircraft.
And you could see this as you were looking at it.
You learned what the distinguishing features were as part of your training.
And this 40 millimeter gun that you used, how many barrels or batteries did you have in each anti-aircraft battery?
Well, you had in our battalion, we had 4 batteries, battery A, B, C, and D, and in each battery had 4 anti-aircraft weapons.
So would each gun fire one after the other, or would they all fire at the same time?
They would not all fire at the same time. It would depend upon where the aircraft were coming in, from what area they were approaching, and where your particular gun was situated.
Yeah. And who controlled the firing of each battery?
Well, each battery was controlled by
Hold on. Okay, so you were describing the controlling of the firing of each battery.
yeah, well, each anti-aircraft weapon and crew, okay, had a gun, had a, call it the, I forget what his title was, but he was the leader of that particular gun crew.
So each gun crew had an officer in charge. Some person in charge.
A non-commissioned officer, usually a staff sergeant.
Okay. All
Okay.
right.
And then the various members of that particular crew, okay, had, well, for example, on the gun you had a tracker for the vertical tracking of the aircraft, as well as the horizontal tracking of the aircraft manually. And then you had a gunner who dropped the ammunition into the breech of the weapon, and he also acted as the firer.
Okay.
you also at times had the entire operation automated, where you had a tracking, electronic tracking system with a horizontal tracker and a vertical tracker that zeroed in on the target, and then you had a range setter, and once we were on the target, okay, the range setter would then give the direction to the gunner to fire.
Okay. So it would be a fire command. Somebody would have to say
Yes.
fire
Right.
once you got it all set in.
Yes, once you zeroed in on the target, there was one person in command that would say fire.
Were you trained on each one of these positions, or were you trained on just one position?
I was trained on three positions that had to do with the automatic tracking. One, the elevation scope, which controlled the gun up and vertically,
Right.
and the horizontal tracker, and then also the range setter that estimated what the range was.
And did you did you practice, how would you practice on actual, I'm sure you didn't shoot down actual aircraft, but I mean, how did you practice on
Well,
whether or how good you were?
You
Yes.
practiced on targets which aircraft at the range pulled targets.
Oh, I see.
Targets were attached to aircraft, and the
Oh,
targets,
so they were towed?
they were towed, right.
Okay.
And the targets were white sleeves of good size. And as a tracker, you could tell whether or not, you could tell how accurate you were going to be as a result of the firings. For example, if you fired a round and it crossed in front of the target, you'd know that you're short in terms of your firing. Okay? If the round went in back of the target, you'd know you're too far off.
And you could tell that by,
You could tell that by envisioning it was ammunition that you could see where it crossed in front of the target or in back of the target.
like traces?
The traces, that's
I
the
see.
word I was trying to think of.
Did any of these aircraft that were towing the targets, did they ever receive any fire?
No.
Never did.
None to my knowledge.
What was the distance between the tow aircraft and the tow
The
targets?
targets were considerably to the rear of the aircraft.
They were, okay,
Many,
all right.
maybe like a football field distance.
100 yards.
Yeah.
So how long did it take you to train on those anti-aircraft guns?
We trained on those anti-aircraft guns of the order of a year and a half.
Year and a half. And going back to the control, each gun crew was individually controlled, or was the battery control? Do you have central control over the whole battery?
Each gun crew controlled its own firings, et cetera. You weren't clued into other.
So it's conceivable that two gun crews could be shooting at the same target?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. And these 40 millimeter rounds, about how big were they?
Our 40 millimeter round was of the order of 24 inches.
Really?
Yeah.
And they're pretty big.
That's including the casing and
Yeah.
the head of it. as
The head of
well.
it, right, the warhead.
The warhead.
Yeah. What do they do, explode when they see that target, when they get closer to target, or they just strike it? What did the warhead consist of?
An explosive of some sort.
I see.
On contact. it would
On
explode.
contact to explode, okay. So after a year and a half, you're in Georgia, say, for 43, well into 44,
Yeah,
is that right?
right.
And where were you on D-Day? June 6, 1944, do you recall?
1946,
44.
1944,
Yeah, I have here that you went into the service on June 24, 1943,
right.
So a year and a half would be
D-Day, I
40
was
foot-
in Camp Stewart, Georgia.
Camp Stewart,
Wait a minute,
Georgia.
no, the war was, D-Day is the landing,
The landing at Normandy,
and then when was that?
June 6, 1944.
June 6th of 1944, I was at Camp Stewart, Georgia.
Camp Stewart, okay. And then from Camp Stewart, you say you went to Texas.
Camp Housey, Texas, during the Battle of the Bulge. They broke up our outfit and sent us down to Camp Housey, Texas, to have 6 weeks of infantry advanced training before being shipped overseas.
And what did that consist of?
That consisted of rifle practice,
Is that the M1?
M1 rifle.
Mhm.
It also consisted of forced marches.
Uh-huh.
It also consisted of training relative to hand-to-hand combat.
Mm-hmm.
It also consisted of simulated battlefield conditions. I forget what they call that.
Infiltration techniques?
Infiltration techniques.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Where you're under simulated battlefield conditions and rounds are being fired above you and you're crawling beneath. It also consisted of training of getting off of a ship, for example, via those various side nets.
On the rope nets.
Rope
Yeah, on the
nets,
rope
yeah.
ladders.
Rope ladders.
Yeah, yeah. Because we
So-
lost quite a few people
Oh, yeah.
not being able to, from getting onto the ship, getting onto the
Right.
boats, they just drowned.
And also had various obstacle courses.
Uh-huh, uh-huh. And did you receive any awards with regard to that training, any recognitions?
The only recognitions that one would get were various medals for marksmanship.
Yeah. I think you said you got the combat infantry badge?
The combat infantry badge I got was after I went into combat.
I see.
You didn't get the combat infantry badge unless you were in combat.
Uh-huh. Is there something called a sharpshooter's badge?
There is, you know.
It's a blue badge with a wreath around it, I believe. Did you get that?
I don't recall whether or not I got
Okay.
that or not.
All right. So how good a shot were you? Pretty good?
That was pretty good, I guess.
Okay. So you went to Camp Housey, and whereabouts is Camp Housey?
Camp Housey was just outside of Dallas, Texas.
Oh, yeah.
The nearest town was Denton, Texas.
Oh, yes. Yeah, I know the town.
There was a nice girls' college there.
Yes, yes. Did you have an opportunity to mix with the local population?
Not very
Go
much.
into
because
town, so to speak?
We did get some weekend passes, but we were only there for a very short period, and the training was very intense.
It was.
Because they wanted to get us out of there as quickly as possible.
Mm. You knew you were going to go into the Battle of the
Oh,
Bulge.
absolutely.
How did you feel about that?
Well, actually, one doesn't recognize what one is getting into.
Because you were never in combat up to that point.
That's right, and it was kind of a fun occasion. In other words, we're going into combat, great,
Yeah, you were anticipating that.
anticipating it.
And all of the boys in your outfit, this outfit was the 84th Anti-Aircraft Battalion.
841st.
841st, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
The Anti-Aircraft Battalion. And then when you were in Housey, was that the 78th Infantry Division?
No, I wasn't assigned to, that was just a training,
Just a training group.
just a training group.
Yeah. But up till that time, you were in the 841st Anti-Aircraft Battalion?
Right.
Okay. So after you got through, how long were you at Housey, Texas?
Just 6 weeks.
6 weeks. And then
6
after
weeks,
that?
And then after that, we went up to Fort Meade, Maryland, which was the, what you call an embarkation point?
Debarkation.
Debarkation.
Mhm.
And there we got on the Queen Elizabeth,
Mm-hmm.
and in very short, I think it was like three to 5 days, we were in Scotland.
How were the conditions on the Queen Elizabeth?
crowded.
Really?
Thousands of troops.
How was the food generally up to this point?
The food was great until one got seasick.
Okay. In training, the food was okay, I guess.
Fair,
huh?
fair.
Fair? Okay. You say it was crowded aboard the Queen Elizabeth. Did you have an opportunity to sleep? Did you have bunks or hammocks or?
Some fortunate individuals had bunks,
Mm-hmm.
and others slept on the deck.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
So,
How was the weather across?
well, the Queen Elizabeth, you may know, did not have any sort of an escort with it. It was so fast that the escorts, ships defending it, couldn't keep up with it.
Uh-huh.
So it went a very zigzag course
I see.
without any escorts.
Okay. And was it obvious that they had pretty much stripped the Queen Elizabeth for troop
Oh, yeah.
transport duties?
Yeah, right.
And so far as the weather is concerned, this would be sometime around 40
It was winter.
winter. Yeah, this was winter. The
It was
Battle of the Bulge
winter,
was
and the
December.
weather was kind of tough.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. And how are the seas? Pretty rough?
The seas were rough also.
Pretty rough, yeah. So you went by way of Scotland?
Scotland, and then to England, and I believe it was Liverpool,
Mhm.
and then went across the Channel to a camp in France. I don't recall what the name of that camp was, but it was on the seaport.
Was
Camp,
that in,
like Camp Lucky Strike or something like
Yeah.
that?
was there any, was that anywhere near the area, was that anywhere near the area of the Normandy landings?
I don't recall.
Omaha Beach or Gold Beach or
I'm not sure.
Juno Beach? You don't know?
I'm not sure.
Okay.
And there, from that camp, we were put on freight cars called 40 and 8s,
Mm-hmm.
where you could get 40 men and 8 horses on one freight car.
Really?
Yeah.
You didn't have horses, of
No,
course.
so
Yeah.
we had,
Yeah, 40 and 8. 40 men.
40 men.
All right. And
And-
conditions were just freight car
Conditions were freight cars that just traveled at night only, not during the daytime, because the enemy aircraft would see you and bomb you.
We didn't have complete air supremacy at that time, did
No.
we?
No.
Mhm.
And then,
So where did you go
that's
from?
where I joined the 78th Infantry Division,
Mhm.
okay? And it was at the tail end of the Battle of the Bulge.
Mhm.
And from that point forward, our division crossed into Germany to the Ruhr River, crossed the Ruhr River, and then eventually we crossed the Rhine River, the Remagen Bridge.
Right.
And at that time that we were crossing that bridge, it was still upright.
Uh-huh.
And when we were crossing that bridge, you had to be very, very careful that you didn't walk into one of the holes
Yes.
in the bridge. And we crossed the Remagen Bridge under heavy fire from the enemy aircraft, Stuka dive bombers, etc.
They still had a good supply of enemy aircraft
They were
at that
still
time.
at that time
Mhm.
sending in their Stukas
Yeah.
to try to knock the bridge out of commission to prevent our troops from crossing over.
Yeah, I think this would have been in December of '44.
I think so.
Yeah,
And
okay.
At that time, when we crossed that bridge, there's a huge tunnel there
Mhm.
that you go through. And there were many, many U.S. troop bodies piled up inside that tunnel.
At what end of the bridge was the tunnel, or did the bridge go through the tunnel?
No, the tunnel was at on the Germany side, the eastern bank of the Rhine.
Okay. And the bridge went right into the tunnel, did it?
Yeah.
Okay. So, just backing up a bit, you said that the Queen Elizabeth was a pretty fast ship. How long did it take it across the Atlantic?
I don't
Any idea?
recall, I think it was something like either 3 to 5 days, something in that time frame.
That's pretty fast.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And how'd you cross the channel?
I'm a blank there.
LST?
I don't recall how we crossed the channel.
It was on a ship, of
It
course.
was on a ship, but
Yeah.
I don't recall what type of a ship it was.
All right. And when you hit the beach, was it using some of these Higgins boats with the flat pot falling
No,
down in
that
front?
part of France where we landed was,
You had harbors,
I think so.
and piers?
Yeah, yeah.
so you went directly onto the harbors or
Right.
piers. Okay. Now, where did this railroad train leave you off? This 40 and 8 railroad train that you got into? When you joined the 78th Infantry Division, where was the division located? Any idea?
I think at that time it was located near the Hürtgen Forest.
And that would be Germany?
Yeah.
Okay.
Near the Hürtgen Forest,
Mhm.
as I recall the name of it.
And you reported to them and were assigned to a rifle company?
I was assigned to a rifle company and assigned to be a runner for the platoon leader, who was a first lieutenant. And I was his runner, and the function of a runner was to lay lines, communication lines, from the headquarters of that particular company to the front troops.
Okay.
And also the responsibility of a runner was, if one couldn't communicate via lines, then the runner would carry messages to the headquarters and back to the platoon leader.
That means that if your line was cut for some reason,
That's right.
then your responsibility would be go back to the platoon leader, get the directions, and bring them up
Right.
front.
Right.
Must have used an awful lot of wire in those days.
Oh, yeah, yeah, long,
Everybody had runners.
yeah, right.
Yeah, yeah. And they were hooked up to a field telephone, were they?
Yep, right.
Yeah, yeah. You find that they worked pretty good?
Yeah, pretty good,
So you had pretty good communications?
right.
Okay. So you were a runner for your platoon leader. Any idea, was it a special platoon or number or anything like that of the infantry division? Was a special platoon designation?
Oh, well, it was one of the companies, and I don't recall which company it was.
Do you remember who your lieutenant was?
Yes, I do remember his name.
What was it?
His name was Biggert.
Bigot.
Biggert.
Mhm.
Yeah, and
What kind of a guy was he?
he was quite a competent individual,
He was.
very competent, yeah.
Had he been in the Army for quite some time? Or?
I don't recall whether he was a long-term Army.
But he knew what he was doing, and you
Oh,
knew it.
absolutely. He was,
When he told you to do something, you did it.
you snapped to it.
Really? Okay. Okay. So with this infantry division, you went forward from the Hürtgen Forest to the Ruhr River?
Across the Ruhr River, then across the Rhine River into that part of Germany.
Mhm.
And
When you crossed both of these rivers, did you use any the natural or any of the artificially made bridges?
no.
You didn't have occasion to use the Bailey bridges or pontoon bridges?
We might have, when we crossed the Ruhr River, we might have used one of those pontoon-type bridges. But when we crossed the Rhine River, the Remagen Bridge was still standing.
Uh-huh.
So shortly after that, the engineers built these other types of bridges because the bridge then became quite unsafe.
Right.
And after that, we were on the front lines.
Tell us something about the combat that you were involved in, as much as you recall, from the Ruhr to the Rhine to the Remagen Bridge?
It
Was there actually firing going on and bombing and 88s and things like that?
Yeah, absolutely.
Tell us something about that.
Well, the Germans were still using their 88s.
Mhm. That's a big gun.
This is a big gun which they used as field artillery and also to shoot down aircraft.
Really?
The German 88s, right.
Mhm. Did you have air cover?
Yes.
Our bombers and our fighters also
Yeah.
engaged them?
Yes, and we used panels to let them know where we were. We let the flyers know where we were.
Mhm.
And very often, things went askew.
Oh, they did. Yeah.
And we had to take cover from our own fire.
You didn't have any communications directly with the aircraft?
No,
Mhm.
panels. Well, we were moving so fast that.
Yeah.
I
It was
don't-
pretty fast movement.
Yeah.
The Germans
At that
were
point-
retreating
at
pretty
that-
good?
At that point, we were moving very fast, and the Germans were retreating very fast also.
Did you have tank support?
Yes.
And what were the conditions with regard to being able to get food and fuel and supplies? Did you have the advantage of the Red Ball Express, for instance, or anything like that?
We had K rations.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. You used
We-
K rations,
We didn't very often have
hot food,
hot food, right.
but you had tanks?
On occasion, we did have tanks that we would escort, or they would escort us.
Yeah, but mostly this was a hand-to-hand combat infantry operation.
Yeah, but there wasn't very much hand-to-hand combat. Most of the casualties that occurred were attributable to artillery or aircraft. But
A rifle or
mostly-
machine gun?
Mostly 88s.
Mostly 88s.
88s.
But you did have rifles and machine guns,
Oh, yeah,
and you had occasion to use those?
yes.
Your anti-aircraft training didn't help you much there, did it? Did you have anti-aircraft guns?
We had anti-aircraft guns located all around the Remagen Bridge
Mhm.
that were protecting us from the enemy aircraft as we were crossing the Remagen Bridge. And
Now, the Remagen Bridge, you say, was being bombed by Stuka dive bombers?
Stuka dive bombers.
How
yeah.
were they? Were they accurate?
They made quite a few holes in it, and eventually I think it did collapse, if I'm not mistaken.
Mm. And
But I was long gone when that occurred. We were well into the other side of the Rhine River.
describe the Remagen Bridge for us. How long, how far, how wide? What kind of equipment could it support when you were there?
Well, it was, as I recall, it was comparable to many of the bridges we have in this country.
Steel?
Maybe comparable to the bridge in San Francisco. I'm not sure, but
Really?
yeah. But of course, we went across it at night,
Mhm.
so I didn't see a hell of a lot.
But you knew it was a steel bridge,
Yes.
and but at night you were even being fired on at night
Oh, yeah.
all the time.
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, the Germans were trying to knock that bridge out because they knew that we were using it to get access across the river
Hmm. Hmm. You say there were holes in the bridge.
from the explosives which the dive bombers used to try to knock the bridge out.
Mhm.
And also, as we were going across, they were dropping stuff
Right.
on us.
What about the tanks and trucks and things like that? Could any of those vehicles get across?
Not while I was there. They were
Yeah.
strictly, I don't think the bridge at that time was strong enough to take any vehicles.
Uh-huh. But you were able to cross it?
We were able to get across before anything serious happened.
Okay.
And from that point forward, it was from town to town, fighting to take each of the towns.
Hmm.
And
Was it door to door, building by building?
well, it was more at that stage of the game. There wasn't much. There wasn't any close combat
Uh-huh.
because the Germans were were kind of backpedaling as fast as they could.
They were retreating.
They were retreating, and we were just taking one town after another.
And would you describe it mostly as type of a rear guard action that they were throwing at you?
They were surrendering.
They were surrendering one after another?
Yeah.
Were there any problems with the surrendering troops? Did you have places to put them? Did they impede your forward progress?
When you
As they surrendered, did they go to the rear? Or?
you would have you would assign people from your own company to escort them to the rear.
Okay.
Under
Arms.
Under arms. Yeah.
And they gave up their... Okay, yeah. You were describing the prisoners that were surrendering in pretty large numbers,
Right.
forming a steady stream back.
Right.
Did you ever see them going over the Remagen Bridge?
No.
Okay. And you had people from your unit, you were still with the 78th Infantry Division.
Right.
You still had people assigned to escort them to the rear?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
And they were giving up their arms?
Absolutely.
How were you supplied so far as ammunition and arms are concerned? Did you have to use any of the German arms in your
No.
exploits? What did you do with those arms? Just destroy them?
Their arms,
Yeah, as they gave them up.
as I, we had people assigned,
Mm-hmm.
okay, that would take care of their
To round up the arms.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And
As far as our own arms are concerned, we had bandoliers. We'd have to.
Belts
We
of-
had our own supply.
you had your own supply.
Own supply with, attached to the headquarters unit.
Yeah. And were you also armed with grenades and things?
Oh, yeah, grenades.
Yeah. So you were going pretty fast.
We were moving very fast at that stage of the game. Once we crossed the Remagen Bridge,
Yeah.
okay, it was very obvious that the war was going to end shortly thereafter.
Uh-huh. Now, name us some of the cities that you went through. Whatever you recall.
Hofgeismar, Germany was one town that I remember very well.
Mhm.
Kassel, Germany,
Mhm.
and Cologne.
Cologne.
Yeah. Stuttgart.
Uh-huh.
So we were moving around pretty
Describe some of the damage that you saw in some of these cities.
good. They were pretty well leveled,
There were,
yeah,
from the bombardment.
from our airplanes.
Did you ever capture any of these German 88s they were causing us so much trouble?
They would just leave the 88s and there, because we were in the infantry, so we didn't.
Yeah. But you never came across any of these 88s as you were moving
The only ones
forward?
that I came across were where they'd been abandoned
Mhm.
by the Germans.
Did you have orders to destroy them?
We didn't.
You didn't bother
No,
with them?
because there were ordnance units assigned to doing things like that.
Uh-huh. Okay. How far did you get as you went into Germany?
As we went into Germany, as I recall, our outfit was a considerable distance from Berlin. I
It
don't
was.
recall many miles, how many
Mhm.
miles it was.
Mhm.
But we didn't, we stopped at a certain point. Our outfit was stopped from going forward.
Mhm.
And then we were moved to the southern part of Germany as a cleanup operation.
Mhm. What areas
As
would that be?
I think it was down around Cologne at that time.
Cologne.
Yeah.
Mhm. Mhm. And were the Germans still retreating pretty fast in front of you?
Well, as a cleanup operation, we would just assign the mission of making certain that if there were any snipers around,
Mhm.
we would do a cleanup.
Okay, all right. Now, after that, what happened? After that?
Well, after that, the war ended,
Uh-huh.
and we got the good news.
Mhm.
And at that time, at that time, when the war ended, there were rumors to the effect that we were going to be shipped to the Pacific.
Uh-huh.
And also a notice came around to the division saying that they wanted MPs for Berlin.
Uh-huh.
And if you could speak German, you could qualify to be interviewed to go into Berlin as an MP, as opposed to getting shipped to the Pacific.
Oh, so that was one of the
So-
attractions
so
for you to
that-
learn German.
Well, I told them I could speak German, and I had learned a few words.
Yeah.
And I was interviewed by a provost marshal, and he said, "Can you speak German?" I said, "Ja, Volt." And he said, "What can you say in German?" And I said, "Wo gehen Sie, Fräulein?" "Gehen Sie spazieren?"
Yes, all right.
And he said, "You're an MP now."
Okay.
So, I was then in the MPs in Berlin,
Uh-huh.
and,
Did you make any effort to learn more German?
oh, yeah, yeah.
They sent you to school or something?
No, I had I learned
Out of a book?
out of a book. And,
Okay.
in fact, a very humorous incident. As an MP, I had a Jeep,
Right.
and I parked the Jeep at a certain location in Berlin and went in to get something to eat or something like that. Came out, the Jeep was gone. The Russians had stole my Jeep.
Oh, really? Oh. You were interacting with the Russians in
Yeah.
Berlin?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. What kind of people were they? How did you deal with them?
We didn't have any problems with them, except that they're pretty good drinkers.
Yeah. But there was no...
There was no animosity.
No animosity?
No, but
Yeah, yeah, yeah. But you lost your Jeep?
I lost my Jeep, and the story was that the Russians had stole my Jeep.
Yeah.
And at that point in time, the provost marshal said to me, "You're going to have to pay for that Jeep."
Right. Okay.
Fortunately, I never had to pay for it.
From what I understand, Jeeps didn't have keyed ignitions. They were switches.
Right.
So anybody could have taken a Jeep.
Right, yeah.
You know. Okay. Tell us what you saw when you went into Berlin. How did you get to Berlin, by the way? Train? Truck?
Truck. I think it was
Okay.
a truck in Berlin.
And that was a little bit of a distance from where
Yeah.
you were, from Cologne?
Yeah.
And tell us what you saw in Berlin.
Well, parts of-
When you came across it, what did you see?
Well, parts of Berlin were in pretty sad shape.
Yeah.
Okay.
The
and,
bombing?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And, but it was, things were well under control then, of
Yeah.
course. I mean, there was no fighting going on,
Mostly cleanup.
cleanup, yeah.
And with the Germans themselves cleaning their cities up and so forth.
Yeah,
Yeah. And that was probably their primary duty.
right.
How were they living?
Well, they were in tough times,
Mhm.
food-wise.
Did you share any of your food with them? Any occasions come up where you shared food, or gave them a K-ration or a candy bar or something like that
For the kids, yeah,
for the kids?
yeah.
Yeah, and that kind of attracted more kids, I suppose.
Right, yeah.
And where did you live?
We lived in, in sort of a, I don't, it might have been a German Gestapo headquarters or something like that.
Mhm.
But we had taken over, and we had decent quarters.
The quarters are pretty good?
Yeah,
And was there electricity and water?
yeah,
So they were pretty well equipped with
yeah,
all the amenities.
yeah.
And even though they were retreating and being defeated, those places that they weren't, those places they still occupied, they were still living pretty high off of the hog compared to their civilian
Yeah.
counterparts.
Right.
And did you face any resentment from the German population when you were in Berlin as victors or anything like that?
No, in fact, On the contrary, they seemed to welcome the fact that the war was over,
Mhm.
okay, and they didn't, they weren't antagonistic at all.
Do you have any ideas or opinions as to why it is? This is October of 2003, and of course, we have conquered pretty much the Iraqis, but still we face the anger and antagonism of the Iraqi people, some of them. I think that most of them welcome our being there and welcome the conditions, but a lot of them don't. Can you explain why it is that we have not been able up till now to seem to pacify them and to meet their demands for electricity, food, water, and so forth? Do you have any opinions on that? Whereas we didn't have that kind of a problem in Germany, but we do have that problem in Iraq today.
I'm at a loss to explain why that is, other than the fact that a lot of this antagonism, okay, in my opinion, are the followers of Saddam, including the soldiers who just
Disappeared.
okay?
Yeah, melted into the
Now,
civilian
an awful lot
populace.
of them disappeared, and they're the ones that are creating the problems.
Right.
I don't think it's the ordinary person that is creating the problems.
Uh-huh. Okay. All right. Coming back to your service in your in Berlin, how long were you there?
Till shortly after VJ
Mm-hmm.
Day.
Where were you on VJ Day? In Berlin?
Berlin, yep.
Do you know where you were when you heard that President Roosevelt had died in May of '45?
I don't recall that.
Don't recall that?
No,
Didn't have any special ceremonies?
no, it must have been, don't recall that.
You were probably busy chasing the Germans down to
Probably,
Cologne.
yeah.
Yeah, it kept you pretty busy. Where were you when they announced that the war in Europe was over?
I was at the war in Europe was over?
Yeah.
Oh, goodness.
When did they tell you that Admiral Donitz surrendered?
Goodness. We were in the Black Forest.
You were.
Black Forest.
Tell us what the Black Forest is like.
Very nice. It's beautiful, beautiful country, okay? But that's where we were at that time.
Were you engaged in combat?
It was mostly cleanup.
Cleanup.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, whereabouts is the Black Forest?
Black Forest is sort of in the south, I'd say the
Southern part of Germany? Okay. Did you intend to re-up?
No, certainly not.
Okay. How were your communications with your family at this time? Did you communicate with them all during your service by letters and so forth?
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Have you kept any of your letters?
No,
Yeah. They'd write to you and you'd write to them.
right.
Would that be in Armenian or English?
English,
In English.
yeah.
And of course, you were censored with regard to what you could say, what you couldn't say.
Yeah.
Yeah. And did you meet anybody that you knew in any of the units that you served? Like high school buddies or neighbors or anybody else? Or did you make pretty much acquaintances of people that you were fighting with in your own units?
Well, when I first went into the service, into the anti-aircraft down at Fort Stewart, Georgia, most of the fellows that shipped down there with me were from this area, Lowell, Lawrence. In fact, I had a buddy that I graduated from high school with that we went down to Camp Stewart, Georgia together. So it was mostly New Englanders that were in that anti-aircraft artillery battalion. Okay.
Yeah.
But when they broke our outfit up and put us in the infantry, okay, very few of your own prior buddies went with you. They didn't send a whole group to one
Yeah.
company.
Yeah.
It was like myself and two other guys who were in the anti-aircraft unit went into this infantry unit.
How did you feel about your unit being broken up?
At that time,
You didn't have any say about it, but how, you had a feeling.
yeah, at that time, we were anxious, as youngsters, we were anxious to get into combat.
Really?
And, yeah, and our unit we had been going over the same routine for many, many months, expecting to go overseas as an anti-aircraft outfit. But apparently they needed infantrymen more so than anti-aircraft units, and that's when they broke up the outfit.
Now, you were not equipped with what they have these days, like body armor or anything like that, were you?
No.
You just had your uniform on, that was it.
Uniform and
You didn't have any shields or,
backpack.
there was a uniform and a backpack, that was
Right.
it.
And your bandoliers and
Yeah.
your,
And if a bullet found you, it was in you.
oh, absolutely.
Yeah, there was no way to stop
Well,
it.
I was fortunate. I didn't get shot. I got hit by shrapnel from an 88.
Mhm. Mhm.
And I refused to go to the hospital. I just went to the aid station.
Why was that?
I didn't want my folks to get a telegram saying I'd been wounded in action.
Uh-huh.
And they would have been the end of the world for them.
Really?
So I avoided that, but I had an interesting thing happen that a buddy of mine who was in the anti-aircraft outfit with me, okay, came back to the States
Mhm.
earlier,
Yeah.
and he called my folks and said, I'm awfully sorry that Al got killed.
Oh, my God.
And someone had told him that I got killed, and that's when I got hit with the shrapnel, and he thought I got killed.
Oh, God, yeah, yeah. When you got hit with the shrapnel, it knocked you out?
No, I was just bleeding.
You're just bleeding, so, all right. So you went to the aid station
station.
because you didn't want your
I-
parents to
I
know
didn't
you...
want to get carted back to a hospital.
Oh, boy, I see, I
Okay.
see. So you went forward from there.
Yeah.
Where was the location of this injury? I'm sorry, where were you hurt?
I was hit I had several in the knee,
Yeah,
the legs. I had several wounds.
but I mean, where in Germany were you when
Oh.
this happened?
I think it was after we had crossed the Rhine River.
But before the Remagen Bridge?
After we had crossed.
After you crossed the
After
Remagen
we
Bridge?
crossed the, you know.
Remagen, okay, all right, all right. And you had mentioned that there were a pretty large supply of bodies
Oh, yeah.
of both, I suppose, German and
Right,
American troops there.
Stacked in that tunnel.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was a terrible sight.
Yeah, yeah. Did you feel lucky or guilty that you were alive? How did you feel when you saw all that?
I felt pretty lucky and pretty scared.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Even though you had been battle hardened pretty much,
You're still scared.
you're still scared. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay. So you went to the 78th Division of the Military Police in Berlin
After the war ended.
after the war ended.
Right.
Did you see any of the sights in Berlin at that time, despite the damage? Were you able to see the Chancellery or any of the quarters in
No,
Berlin that would be of
no.
interest?
No, we were mostly either on duty or sleeping.
Mm-hmm. Tell us, did you have occasion to challenge any of the Nazi soldiers who had surrendered that wouldn't listen to you if you told them, for instance, to stop, but they just ignore
No.
you and kept walking? Because we did have an occasion where one of our occupation forces, members of this
Yeah.
post, had said to, halt, and they'd say, oh, go to hell, and they
Yeah.
kept walking.
No, didn't have
They
any
told them to
experience.
put a bullet in a breech, and then they'd listen.
Right.
Yeah.
No, I had no experience of that nature.
But they followed anything that you told them.
Yes.
Okay.
In fact, I found them to be very humble.
Really?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Because many of them were just very happy that they were being captured or the war was going to be shortly over.
Really?
They didn't want to continue fighting
I see.
because they were getting killed by the thousands.
Uh-huh, okay. Is that where your service came to an end, in Berlin?
Yeah. That's when I shipped back to the States and was
Okay.
discharged.
So, you've told us that your service ended in February of 1946.
Right.
And did you get back to the States by air, a boat, a ship?
It was a boat, a small boat. It took 30 days.
Really?
Yeah.
How did you get from Berlin to where you debarked?
By truck.
And you drove all the way from Berlin to the debarkation point?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, so you, where'd you debark from to come back home?
I think it was somewhere, one of the French ports.
French ports,
Yeah.
Nice, Marseille, Calais.
Well, I don't recall.
Okay.
I don't recall which one it was.
You were aboard a small ship for 30 days before you got to the United
Yeah,
States?
it was a barge.
Really?
Yeah, and there were only something like 20 servicemen on that barge.
It took you 30 days to get to the United States?
Yeah,
You didn't go by way of England,
no,
right straight home?
it was very slow, a slow boat to
Slow,
China.
slow boat of the United States. Okay. And you knew that the war was over in VJ Day in Japan,
yeah,
so you didn't
right.
have to go to the Pacific. So you're happy to get home.
Yeah, and
And-
VJ night, I was at a USO,
Where's that?
the service club in Berlin.
Uh-huh,
You
okay.
know, the USO had service clubs.
Must have been quite a celebration
all over.
there.
Oh, yeah. You know,
Yeah, yeah.
We
A lot of
we
champagne
tied
flowing.
one on pretty good that night.
That's good, all right. Where did you arrive in the United States?
Boston Harbor.
Uh-huh, okay. And you got home, your parents happy to see
I went
you?
up to, well, we had to go up to Fort Devens
Mhm.
to get discharged.
You called your parents?
Yeah,
They were happy to
very happy.
hear?
Yeah.
Had they, when one of your buddies had told them that you were killed,
Yeah.
Had they done anything about that
Well, they got a letter from me
after that?
after that, so
Yeah.
that,
So that was okay?
yeah, that was okay. They were waiting to hear something from the War Department, which
Yeah,
they never did.
they never
because
did.
of that- my letter.
Okay, all
And
right. So, after that, I suppose you went into civilian work?
yeah, after that.
Did you take advantage of the GI Bill?
Yep, yep.
Where did you go?
I first went to, I went to pharmacy college
Mm-hmm.
first,
Mm-hmm.
and I didn't care for that.
Did you become a pharmacist?
No, I didn't.
Okay,
Because I had to work in a drugstore on weekends, and
Okay.
I didn't want to work in a drugstore on weekends. I
okay.
didn't want to work 7 days a week, such as pharmacists had to. So then I went to Burdett College and majored in accounting.
Mm-hmm.
And then after I got out of Burdett College, I went to Clark University and got my degree in business.
Uh-huh.
And after that, I got a job
Doing what?
with Ultrasonic Corporation as
Uh-huh.
contract administrator.
Uh-huh.
And then after that, I got a job with it was AVCO, it was actually AVCO Corporation at the time.
Oh, yes.
And went to school 5 years, nights,
Mm-hmm.
in engineering,
Mhm.
so that I could at least understand the engineering terminology, since the unit that I was working was a research laboratory
Mhm.
in high-temperature gas dynamics. for the
So
Defense
you were
Department.
doing defense work there
Right.
with
Well,
AVCO?
Principally defense work, and
Wh-
some commercial work.
Yeah.
We worked on artificial hearts, for example.
Was your veterans service, did your veteran service help you as you progressed along with these jobs? Or did your veterans history help you as you went along with these jobs, particularly in the defense field?
Not very much.
Not very much, yeah. But you felt that the GI Bill did help you get your
Oh,
education?
absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely.
You're thankful for
That
that?
was a godsend.
Okay.
It was-
Now, what we're going to do is end it here, and let me see. Okay, let me ask you a few questions here. You joined the Post, Post 41 in Watertown.
Right.
When was that?
I think early 80s.
Okay. Did you have a good relationship with people here? What led you to join the Veterans Post?
Most of my friends were boys from Watertown,
Mhm.
and they became members of this post.
Mhm.
So in as much as they were my friends, they encouraged me to also join, and I did.
Okay.
Because at that time, I lived in Medford. I didn't live in Watertown.
You had a good camaraderie with the people here?
Yeah, right.
Okay. We're going to end this right here. And what we're going to say is that the oral history of Al Arsenian has been very interesting, and we want to thank you for your participation, because you've also participated as an officer of this post too, I think, haven't you?
No.
No?
No,
But you've
no.
enjoyed the camaraderie and you've enjoyed being a member of the post.
Absolutely.
Okay. So we're going to end this oral history on a beautiful Saturday morning. And again, for the posterity, this is October 18, 2003. We hope that the information that we have given, and we hope that the testimony of Al Arsenian will be of help and inspiration to those who follow us. We have no idea as to when the viewer will view these tapes. However, we hope that the experience that we have related will be of help and inspiration to future generations. And Al, we want to thank you for your participation.
My pleasure.
And we hope that this oral history project will fulfill its, which is one of teaching and showing people freedom is not free and it does demand sacrifice. Good luck. Thank you.